So now I have the whole box put together kind of upside down, and I need to put glue on all of the pieces that are going to be touching. So on the outside tabs and the inside faces. Okay, so I made just a little puddle of glue here for myself. You have to work somewhat quickly with this. You don't want the glue to dry before you can piece it all together. And you also don't want too much extra inside the box. So I'm going to have to grab a wet paper towel once this is all clamped up to wipe all that out as best I can. We're gluing both the bottom and the sides together at the same time so that the whole box stays square. Found that if you just try and clamp or glue the sides together, it can get a little off, like a parallelogram instead of a rectangle, and we want to try to avoid that as much as we can. I'm also putting glue on this inside part where the bottom is going to be clamped in place. And you may have noticed in the previous video, the bottom was just a little bit shorter than this dado that we cut, but it's actually better for it to be smaller than rather than larger than, because it's going to mean less sanding for us later. Again, we're getting any of the faces where the boards will be glued together. I do still have my chalk letters on here to remind me of what sides go to what. It's important that you dry fit this all together before you start to glue, because you don't want to have to go back and redo anything. I'm using just a scrap board over here to put the glue on. It makes it a little easier to get to than trying to get out of the bottle each time. Also helps so we don't use too much and get a lot of extra that squeezes out after clamping it together. The way I have this situated, the outside faces of these, the ones that say in, are going to be clamped up to the inside of this board. So I'm going to make sure I get glue on those as well, even though there's no dado there. Okay, and lastly, I want to get glue around the edges of this. I did pick the nicest face of this bottom piece to be on the inside of the box, because people are more likely to see the inside of the box and to tip it upside down and see the bottom side of it. Something that may be counterintuitive at first, because you think you want the outside of the box to look nice. But again, once it's full of jewelry or whatever you might put in it, people are less likely to tip it upside down. Now that we have glue on everything, we'll put the sides back together first. I'm going to set the bottom in place here. Get my last side put in. Which happens to be a little tight. Maybe I'll set the bottom back off to the side for a second. Alright. Set this back in place again. Now we have quite a few clamps over here. You want to make sure that when you're clamping this, I'm going to start off with the top to make sure the bottom is squeezed in place. But you want to make sure you put on the tongues that are not on the same piece of wood. Right? You don't want to put this clamp here because that wouldn't do anything. It's just be squeezed on this one board. Instead, I want to squeeze on these two side pieces to force them in. It sounds like common sense, but I have students that mess that part up every year. So, don't be one of them. Same goes for the short sides of your box. Notice I have a gap in here. Make sure I put a clamp there to fix that. And squeeze it in place. You should see just a little bit of glue starting to squeeze up through the cracks. I'd like to see that joint just a little tighter as well. Okay, and you can kind of see the glue on the inside of the box here. It's going to be important that I get a wet rag and I wipe all that out as much as possible before it dries, because otherwise the stain will not soak into those parts on the board.